She was only 16 years old when the weight of a kingdom was placed upon her fragile shoulders. England's bells rang, proclamations were read, and her name was announced as Queen, but Lady Jane Grey did not smile. She did not celebrate. Instead, she cried. In a world where power was everything, Jane Grey became a queen against her will, destined for a fate she never chose. Her reign would last just 9 days, but her story would echo through centuries as one of the most tragic chapters in English history. Mid-16th century England was a dangerous place to be royal. The Tudor court was ruled by ambition, fear, and religion. Protestant and Catholic factions fought not only with words but with blood. Kings and queens rose and fell quickly, and survival depended on alliances rather than innocence. In this ruthless environment, young Jane Grey was raised far away from dreams of the throne. She was scholarly, deeply religious, and more comfortable with books than with crowns. Power was not her desire, knowledge was. Jane was born into nobility, but not into certainty. She was a great-niece of King Henry VIII, which placed her close enough to the throne to be useful, yet far enough to be expendable. From an early age, she was known for her intelligence. She mastered Latin and Greek, studied philosophy, and held strong Protestant beliefs. Those beliefs, in a divided England, would become both her importance and her downfall. When King Edward VI, Henry VIII's son, fell gravely ill, the question of succession became urgent. Edward was Protestant, and his rightful heir, Princess Mary, was a devout Catholic. But refusal was not an option. Surrounded by ambitious relatives and threatening nobles, Jane accepted the crown with tears in her eyes. The throne she never wanted had already sealed her fate. England would soon reject her. Mary Tudor would rise. And the girl who never asked to rule would soon pay the ultimate price, not for ambition, but for obedience. Lady Jane Grey's reign began not with confidence, but with fear. Crowned in name, she remained trapped in the Tower of London. Not as a symbol of strength, but as a girl surrounded by whispers and warnings. Every decision made in her name was controlled by powerful men, especially her father-in-law, John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. Jane was queen, yet she held no real power. She was a figurehead placed on the throne to protect Protestant rule and political ambition. Outside the Tower walls, England was restless. The people did not cheer Jane's name. Instead, they remembered Princess Mary, the daughter of Henry VIII. The rightful heir in their eyes. Mary was strong-willed, experienced, and determined. As Jane sat uneasily on the throne, Mary gathered support across the country. Nobles, soldiers, and common people alike began to rally behind her claim. What started as quiet support soon became open rebellion. Inside the court, panic spread. Northumberland marched out to stop Mary, leaving Jane behind, alone and vulnerable. This decision would prove fatal. Without Northumberland's control, loyalty inside the council collapsed. One by one, Jane's supporters abandoned her. The same men who had pushed her onto the throne now turned away, desperate to save themselves. After just 9 days, the truth could no longer be denied. Mary's forces were stronger. Public opinion was clear. The council switched sides and proclaimed Mary as queen. Jane's reign ended as suddenly as it had begun. There was no battle, no dramatic overthrow. Only betrayal and silence. Jane was arrested and labeled a traitor. The crown was removed, and she was once again a prisoner in the Tower. This time, however, the Tower was no longer a royal residence, it was a waiting room for death. Jane understood this. Despite her youth, she faced her fate with calm dignity. She wrote letters, prayed, and accepted responsibility for a crime she never intended to commit. Mary I entered London in triumph. At first, she showed mercy. Jane was young, innocent, and clearly manipulated. Execution was delayed. But peace did not last. When rebellions broke out in Jane's name, Mary's patience ended. The crown Jane never wanted had now turned her into a threat, one that could not be ignored. Jane's fate was sealed. The girl scholar who had ruled for 9 days now stood at the edge of history's darkest moment. On a cold February morning in 1554, Lady Jane Grey was led out into the courtyard of the Tower of London. She was 17 years old. The same walls that had once sheltered her as a queen now stood as silent witnesses to her execution. Dressed simply, holding a prayer book, Jane walked with steady steps. There was fear, but there was no panic. She had accepted what history had decided for her. Jane's final moments revealed the strength that power had never given her the chance to show. On the scaffold, she spoke calmly, declaring that she died innocent of ambition. She forgave those who had wronged her and placed her faith in God. When blindfolded, she briefly faltered, unable to find the execution block. It was the only moment that showed how young she truly was. Moments later, her life ended with a single stroke. England moved on quickly. Mary I secured her throne and ruled with determination, restoring Catholicism and punishing those who opposed her. Yet Jane's death left an uneasy shadow over Mary's reign. To many Protestants, Jane became more than a failed queen, she became a martyr. Poems, paintings, and stories transformed her from a political pawn into a symbol of innocence destroyed by power. Centuries later, Lady Jane Grey is remembered not for the crown she wore, but for the tragedy she endured. She never sought the throne, never ruled with force, and never betrayed her conscience. Her story forces us to ask difficult questions about history: who is truly guilty, the child who obeyed, or the adults who used her? Is power worth the lives it consumes? The crown she never wanted remains a reminder that history is not only shaped by conquerors and rulers, but also by the innocent caught between ambition and fate. Lady Jane Grey ruled for just 9 days, but her legacy has lasted far longer, etched into history as a warning, a tragedy, and a quiet act of courage.